So I'm Vicki Lenz. I'm a professor at the Silverman School of Social Work, and I teach social policy. I am also a lawyer, and I've worked on social justice causes all of my legal career. So I'm used to discussing politically charged issues. I'm also used to contentious encounters with people because that's what being a lawyer is all about. But notwithstanding my training and experience, I struggle with how to create a space for difficult and controversial conversations in the classroom. So I come to this nowhere near being an expert on it. And in fact, with a lot of sort of challenges as to how to do this and how comfortable I feel doing certain things and changes over. So that's my reason for suggesting the session. I'm hoping to create a community where we can discuss all of this together. And it's also why I asked Michael Lewis, a colleague at the School of Social Work, to co-present. I know no one better than Michael talking with people who might not agree with him and setting the type of tone that encourages people to both respect and listen to others. And he will be discussing what he does in the classroom to create such an environment on day one of classes. But first, I'd like to lay out what I see as the main challenges in a classroom when it comes to difficult or controversial issues. Difficult is a well-known euphemism for the conversations we have or don't have about such things as gender, race, and class. It can include the microaggressions that occur as people talk about these issues, the Black student who is called on to continually represent the views of Black people as if it's monolithic, privileged students who stereotype when talking about certain groups or individuals. For example, in my social policy class, this shows up when we talk about poverty and where students may perpetuate stereotypes of the kinds of people who receive welfare, which in the larger public discourse on welfare is a code word for Black. Then there is the language we use in class, and more specifically, the changing norms of language. Over my many decades of involvement in social justice causes, there have been many changes in what's considered appropriate language. Like Jillian Bays went over on Tuesday, Hispanic has devolved into Latino, Latina, and now perhaps Latinx. So my question to myself is when to start using the new term, if at all. And it is okay, for example, to say pregnant women and not use the newer phrase pregnant people. And then there's pronouns. Some of us adapt them with ease. Others of us stumble over them or are not always comfortable publicly identifying our gender orientation. We worry, or at least I worry, when I confuse gender pronouns or forget to use them. And then, of course, there's the class discussion that goes from, oh, great, students are so engaged and passionate, to, oh, no, things are getting out of hand. The temperature goes up in the classroom, students interrupt one another, and suddenly it's more than just a learning opportunity, but a high stakes encounter. One way I try to set parameters for such discussions is to set them up as role plays. I give people permission or require them when assigning sides to argue a view they might not believe in. So in my law and social work class, we argue Supreme Court cases on controversial issues, drawing from both the majority and dissent. The structure of the arguments and the fact that it is assigned, I think, makes it easier for students to try out ideas, to listen to what the other side is saying. For the most part, these have gone well. Social work students love to role play. But this year, one such role play went off a bit. I chose a Supreme Court case on the motor vehicle version of stop and frisk, which required one side, the majority in this case, to the police. One student complained that because she came from the Black community, hearing a defense of the practice constituted microaggression. So this example raises another aspect of controversial issues. As much as I am concerned with microaggressions, I am also concerned that, especially in a classroom, different viewpoints and ideas need to be tolerated and, in fact, welcome. That is the point of an education. I worry, especially in a social work school where students tend to be liberal or progressive, where does the conservative viewpoint fit in? Are these students being silenced? How to know where to draw the line between offensive views versus different views. How to know where to draw the line between comments that need to be called out or called in, as we like to say now, and comments where to do so would stifle free debate, isolate students who hold unpopular views, and disrupt the learning process. These are some of the things I hope we have time to discuss today. As a thoughtful Thursday session, we structured this session to have ample time for discussion so we can talk together about our experiences and challenges. I will also put into the chat some resources. There's many of them. I had difficulty choosing. There were so many of them, which is a great sign. But first, Michael will describe how he sets the stage in his classroom to avoid some of what I have described.
Hi, everyone. As Vicki said, my name is Michael Lewis. And like her, I teach policy at Silverman. I also sometimes teach courses in statistics and economics and public policy. And although I teach mainly in the School of Social Work, I have taught Hunter students at Roosevelt House a couple of times, of course, on two times on inequality. But I teach mainly in social work school, and that actually does influence how I try to set a tone in my class. I know my audience pretty well after 20 years. I think I know, I can't know for sure, but I have a sense of their political leanings, things like that. So a lot of what I do is really covered by that audience, and you may see some of that as I talk. So what I was gonna do, I thought it best to do just go over what I go over in the first day of class, and that may spark some conversation. So I'm gonna share the screen if I can. I think I can. So what I have here is really, and I won't read every word, but give you just an overview. But what I have here is something that I include on the syllabus. So the first day of class, I do what probably many of you do. I talk about the course, what they can expect, readings, things like that, assignments, et cetera, et cetera. But then I spend a lot of time going over what I call the norms of engagement, right? And I'll just give a summary overview of what this involves. So there's one section there where I try to contrast what I hope to do in class with a lot of what goes on out in the world, for better or for worse. Maybe sometimes for better, maybe sometimes not. But I talk about social media, the types of discussions on social media in politics and things like that, what comes up in those discussions. And I try to communicate that there may be a role for those things, calling folks out, things like that. And then I try to say in that paragraph, those two paragraphs, what I'm hoping to do though in our class is something a bit different. I want to have different kinds of discussions than what one might see on Twitter or in places like that. And so I say a bit about that, and then say a bit about what I have in mind. And I pretty much say that a lot of what I try to do in class, what I hope we'll do as a class, me and the students, is something that they might be familiar with if they've had courses in philosophy, maybe literature, things like that. And I say that I want to have us try to like deal with arguments, right? So students are going to like take positions on various things. What I want to have us try to do is do that in a way that focuses on arguments for people's positions, counter arguments, things like that. So that's what that first section is about, you know, sort of setting up how I want to do things and how it might contrast with the general world out there outside of school. And then I go over a few what I call principles, where I try to spell out a bit more of what I have in mind. And again, I'll just go over, I won't go into as much as I do in class here, but I'll just give you a sense of what I'm talking about. So the first one I call the principle of fallibility. And all I mean by that, and I explained this to them, and what I mean by that is that we all of us have strong views about things, and we believe we're right. That's why they're strong views, strongly held views. But I say to them, you know, I want both them and me, I want us to all be open to the possibility that we might be wrong, like we might not be right, and just remain open to that possibility. Even if you hold a view strongly, there may be some very small chance if you might think that you might not be right about that, right? So that's what I get at about that. And again, we spent some time talking about that. The second principle I talk about is the idea that there are some, like, people make claims about various things. They have beliefs, they make claims about various things. And there is such a thing as some of those claims being true and some not being true. That may seem obvious, but among many of my students, they don't agree with that. I mean, some of them might be what one would call a relativist about such things, and that's come up in this. So that comes up sometimes when I present this. But as we have those discussions, they usually end up thinking that some things are true, and so they end up seeing what I'm getting at right there. But that's another principle we talk about. And then on 3, I talk a bit about how they can come to any conclusion that they want to come to in class. I teach classes, as I said, in policy, economics, things like that. And so very heated topics come up about policy and welfare and who's lazy and who's not, and things like that. What welfare does. I mean, all that can come up in that class pretty easily. And so I try to communicate that if you think something is the case, feel free to say it, right? You can say what you think. We're in an educational space, a university, feel free to do that. And that's what 3 is getting at. But 4, I quickly add, but it's my hope though that when you do that, you provide your reasons for believing your conclusion. Why do you believe what you believe? What are your reasons? Do you think they're good reasons? Why are they good reasons? So I'm really trying to get at, again, fleshing out what I mean by construct arguments in the class. So 3 and 4 are trying to get at. And then 5, I'll talk a bit about what you might want to do, what I'm hoping you'll do if you disagree with someone, right? Because there will be disagreement. In my classes, there always are disagreements. Even among social workers who, as Vicki said, tend to be, not in every case, but tend to be more left-leaning, somewhere in that neighborhood. There are differences even among them, sometimes profound and tense ones. So I thought it might be important to say something about what to do if you disagree with someone. And what I'm trying to get at there is the importance of trying to disagree with what they're claiming and why, and address that and not the person, right? So, or their suspect motivations, right? Because we often hear people criticize someone's argument by questioning their motives. And again, I'm not saying there's never a place for that. There may be a place for that. And we may talk about where those places are. But I want the emphasis in the class to be on trying to assess what people believe, what they're claiming, and why, and not so much them as a person or their suspect motivations. So that's what I'm getting at under 5. And point 6, or principle 6, I just say there that others have the right to criticize your arguments in the manner I spelled out in 5. So I'm trying to really just communicate it's okay to disagree, it's okay to differ, it's okay to say what you think about the issues. Just try to do so in a way where you make a case for what you believe, offer your reasons. If you want to criticize someone, criticize their reasons or what they're saying. Just try to address what people are saying, not the people. And I then moved to 7, where I asked them to accept the principle of charity. And what I mean there is that I mean a few things, but the main thing is that if someone is making an argument that you think is pretty weak, and you want to sort of address the argument or criticize it, if you can, try to criticize a stronger version of their argument. If there's a stronger way to make their case, think about what that might be and try to address that, right? So in other words, be charitable in your interpretation of what they mean, what they're saying. Try to address the stronger version of their argument. If they say something that could be taken as racist or transphobic or heterosexist or any of those things, at least entertain the possibility that they might not have meant it in that way. Maybe they did, but they might not have meant it in that way, and at least entertain that as a possibility. And if possible, before you attack, ask for clarification. You might even say, that sounded to me like a racist statement for these reasons. Is it how you meant it? I mean, you give them a chance to maybe correct the mistake or something they've misspoken about before the attack. And then again, the hope is that they will attack their argument, not them as people. That's what I'm getting at in that seventh principle. And then 8, I mean, I am trained in social work, so I get that. What I'm 8, I get that people are not going to always be able to do 1 through 7. We're human. The topics can be very contentious. Sometimes you just might think that this student is the most racist mother, you know. I mean, people might feel very strongly, and they just can't do this, right? And so, or there is the chance that they just can't do 1 through 7, and I acknowledge that. And so I say, so if you're in that situation, you know, you can try doing some things. And I joke there, you know, count to 10 or 100. The way my grandmother said, she used to, when she was alive, she used to count to 10, count to 100 or whatever, and maybe you've calmed down by then. Maybe just try to remember that even if you think their views are as wrong as any set of views can possibly be, they may think the same thing about your views, right? And sometimes that can help you try to address the argument, not the person sometimes. And at other times, I mentioned there, you may just have to like step out. I mean, this was first created in the days when we were in classrooms. I haven't been in one in 2 years, but I do talk about this on Zoom too. You can turn the camera off, turn the mic off, go to get a glass of water or whatever, glass of water. But the point is that you can, if you need to gather yourself, that's fine too. But I'm just trying to acknowledge, Nate, that we're all human, and we will all do the best that we can, hopefully, to try to act in accordance with norms 1 through 7. But if not, it won't be the end of the world. I mean, and I'll tell a story about that. A few years ago, I was in class, back in a classroom, and I had a guest speaker who was a free market libertarian that I invited to come to class. I'm not one of those. And if you know me, you'll know that. But I invited someone to come to class to talk about their views, because it was a section of the course on political ideology. And so I thought it might be good if they had an actual libertarian come and see what they thought, instead of having me try to pretend to be one. So I invited her to come. She's a good friend of mine. She came, and a student, I won't go into all the details, but a student just got really disgusted with what she was saying and said, I can't take the shit anymore, and walked out. Now, you know, maybe that I can't take the shit anymore part wasn't great, maybe, but that's what she thought, right? And so she walked out, and she was exercising or living out principle 8. That was fine. I talked to her later on. She apologized. I was like, just no worries. You know, we went over this in class. No worries, come back, and it's all good. So people are human. I get that, right? But I try to have them go through 1 through 7, or abide by 1 through 7 as much as possible. I try to as well. And this is all of what I do to try to manage difficult conversations in class. I mean, notice I haven't really said anything about, I mean, this can apply to any conversation, right? But I came up with this format and these principles having in mind the difficult ones, right? That's what really drove this, right? But I try to do that the first day of class. In most cases, classes go pretty well. Students typically are fine with this. The classes go pretty well in most cases. And that's about it. That's all I do. I thought that might spark some discussion. We'll see. So I'm done.
So if anyone has any reactions, any questions, wants to share some experiences,